Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs, their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com.
The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is our technical segment. It's a sponsored technical segment by the fine folks at Javelin Networks, and in particular, Omer Yair. I knew I was going to mess that up. It always, welcome to my life. Omer,
embrace the fail forward.
That's right. Omer, welcome to the show. He's laughing at me.
Hey, good to be here. I'm glad to join you.
Yes, it's nice to have you. I'm sorry I missed you at DerbyCon. We didn't get a chance to cross paths, but you gave a presentation at DerbyCon. So, Omer, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about your background and your role today at Javelin Networks, and then about the talk you gave at DerbyCon.
Okay. So I manage the endpoint team at Javelin Networks. I joined Javelin 2 years ago. And before Javelin, I was doing malware research for Trusteer. I was focusing on financial malware. And before that, I did 6 years developing medical imaging software for Algotech. In between, I also have a photography BFA, which is not related to our field, but I always think that you need to do some stuff for the soul, not just for the technical stuff, not just for the mind.
Right.
So that's about it.
Awesome. And then your talk at DerbyCon, make sure I get the title right. Goodbye, obfuscation. Hello, InvisiShell. Hiding your PowerShell script in plain sight. So how'd you come up with this talk?
So we did a research on Javelin about how to hook .NET assemblies. And we found some interesting ways to hook the assemblies. And when we started thinking about it, we started to ask, what can we do without it, with the hooking? And then we immediately figured out that you can use the hooking to both get visibility, much better visibility in PowerShell in regards to attack using PowerShell, but also you can get invisibility at the same time by using the same technique of hooking the .NET assemblies. And we went off, my team and several other members from Javelin, and we built 2 tools that the first one allows you to deobfuscate scripts on real time, which means that if you have a protection that can detect those scripts, it will block them. And the other tool simply make all the PowerShell security feature obsolete, because it just bypass every one of those features at the same time.
You know, it's interesting, Omer. It's similar to what we were talking about with Sysmon. And we started off with a segment about how you can use Sysmon to monitor your system. And then Carlos came on and presented. It was like, here's how you can completely bypass and trick Sysmon and be on the system, and Sysmon will have no idea that you're there. And it seems like your research was kind of the same thing, like looking for a way to detect PowerShell, you found a way to bypass detection.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are many methods that people are starting to use instead of PowerShell because of PowerShell security features, which I think Microsoft did a really good job adding them, and they also do a really good job publishing them. And you can see the shift on red teams that are starting to move to C#, to native C# instead of writing their code on PowerShell. And our method allows them to go back and use PowerShell and have all the advantages that PowerShell gives them, and still use the same old code that they know that works, and they don't need to develop all the new tools anew.
Are there significant disadvantages to using C#, or is it really just that I have to rewrite a bunch of my modules into our tools?
There is a big advantage for PowerShell over any other method. And the first one is that PowerShell.exe is a trusted executable on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So most networks and most organizations will allow PowerShell.exe to run on any computer. And the second thing, which is the dangerous part, is that you can have attacks that live off the land, which means that they don't leave any trace on disk if you use PowerShell, because the script is being compiled at runtime, and you don't need to download the file to the computer and execute it, which all of those steps leaves a lot of noise on the computer that forensics team can then use to understand what was the attack and what happened there. And if you use PowerShell, you have none of those remedies that are left on the computer unless you use PowerShell security features. And that's the powerful thing about PowerShell attacks.
So, Omer, if you could maybe walk us through the bypass method, or how you bypassing the PowerShell security implementation.
So we chose to implement it using a CLR profiler hooking method, which is it's not there is a known CLR profiler hooking method to hook .NET assemblies, but we developed a completely new method using the same CLR profiler, and I'll explain it in a bit. And that method allows us to hook .NET functions. And now PowerShell runs on top of the .NET framework. So all of the PowerShell assemblies are actually .NET assemblies, and we can hook them on runtime and then change the functionality of those functions. So what we did, we took all the security features, we found out what functions are activating them, and we actually disabled them by just placing hooks on those functions that do nothing, just return the functions to the callers.
Awesome. So carry on. You said you'd get to get to other stuff in a bit. So yeah, keep going.
We did the same with Babel Shellfish, which is the tool that allows you to deobfuscate. We used the same method of CLR profiler hooking, and we did the opposite, because we did a lot of research on PowerShell source code to understand how it works, how the engine works, how it compiles your code. And we also looked at how AMSI works. And a lot of people know that AMSI can provide a lot of powerful protection against PowerShell attacks, but it's kind of easy to bypass it. And when we started to look why, we found out that the place that PowerShell calls AMSI with the script is when the script can be sometimes still obfuscated. And that led us to think how we can do it better. And we started looking at the source code, and we found specific points on the code that we could alter and call AMSI on those points that will provide AMSI with much better visibility than the current implementation. So what we think of Babel Shellfish is like an extension to PowerShell, and we're still talking with Microsoft about them implementing those changes that we made externally to have them already implemented internally in PowerShell in the next versions.
So is Microsoft basically working to close down the loophole where it will detect this PowerShell running? So
we found two ways to hook .NET assemblies. The first one is the CLR profiler, which I talked about, and this method requires you to drop a file on the disk, change the environment variables to make every .NET program load this CLR profiler. And if you want to install it without administrative privileges, you also need to write some registry keys to have it activated. And Microsoft won't fix this method because it leaves a lot of mess on your computer, and security products can detect this. They can detect all of those signs and know that someone is doing something malicious on your computer. The other method that we found out does not require any file to be dropped on disk, and it's actually a very dangerous method, and we are still doing a responsible disclosure with Microsoft. So we will not publish the code unless we get an okay from Microsoft on this method that we can share it also with the world.
And it's my assessment that Microsoft's really, really good to work with. Multiple people have reported. We work with them in a much different capacity, but I feel like they're good to work with. It sounds like you're practicing responsible disclosure, so I'm assuming that the relationship with Microsoft is good.
Yeah, they were really responsive and really good to work with. I'm glad that we had this chance. I also had Leo Holmes watching the talk at DerbyCon, which was really
a little nerve-wracking, I'm sure.
Nerve-wracking, of course. Like, he's the #1 expert on PowerShell security, and I'm just showing how I broke all the stuff that he wrote. So it was like a little bit, like you said, nerve-wracking. But he was also really supportive, and he told me that they're working on fixing those stuff. And I hope this cooperation will carry on.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Questions for Omer? Those of you that are pen testers and may deploy PowerShell payloads. Joff, I know you're back. You missed the first part of that. So
yeah, I came in halfway. I had to adjust the generator, so I'm back in business. But sorry for missing the 10 minutes.
So Joff, when you're doing pen tests, and Larry too, I mean, you're finding you have to shift away from PowerShell, or is it still largely successful?
So here's my deal. When I'm pen testing and I'm using PowerShell, I'm definitely not placing PowerShell on disk anymore, ever. And when I do use it, I will attempt to downgrade and make sure that I'm running PowerShell version 2 so that the instrumentation is not there. And I am getting closer and closer to the point where I'm going to abandon it altogether. If I can write .NET-enabled stuff in some other language, it's frankly a little easier because people are instrumenting well with PowerShell. And, thank goodness they are. I think it's great.
You should have been here for the first part of that segment, Joff.
Sorry, I was offline. I had to switch power sources.
It's okay. It's okay. So Omer,
at least I managed to get back, right? Screwdriver, flashlight, multimeter. I'm back in business.
Nice. So, Omer, what was the reception like at DerbyCon? You spoke with Lee. Did a lot of pen testers that appreciate your work and are going to integrate this now into their tool sets and stuff. Same for the defenders, perhaps.
Yeah, I hope people will use both tools, both the red and blue teams. I got a lot of very good response, and people were really enthusiastic about it, and they want to try the new tools. We still haven't released them. We think we will release them next week. We're still sorting out the code to make it releasable. And I think the community will really like both tools because they both offer stuff that is currently missing in PowerShell on both ends.
Any questions for Omer on PowerShell bypasses, defenses, Joff, Larry?
Go watch the talk.
Go watch the talk. That's right. The talk is posted.
Yeah, I kind of missed it, but I guess obfuscation probably talked about a lot. Some of the work that Daniel Bohannon has done in both obfuscating and de-obfuscating has been pretty cool. So have you? Do you have a comment on that, or have you already made the comment? So I apologize if I'm asking a question that's already been asked.
I already made the comments about it previously, but I also have examples if you want to see both Babel Shellfish and InvisiShell.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah.
So let me share my screen.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start with Babel Shellfish. Okay, so Babel Shellfish has two DLLs. The first one is the CLR profiler, that is the hooking. The second one is the .NET DLL, that it's the actual hooks. It has a fancy batch install script that you can choose if you want the bug out, if you are doing something online testing. You can also send all the logs that we get to AMSI to scan it. It still doesn't work because AMSI doesn't know how to read our code. You can also log AMSI. This is just for curiosity if you want to see what AMSI gets. And you have a log folder, which is saved exactly as PowerShell transcription folder. We just copy the code bluntly. Thank you, PowerShell, for that. And the last thing you need to provide is the Babel Shellfish path for both DLLs. You need administrative privileges to install the script, to install Babel Shellfish. But once you install it, every time you will load PowerShell, it doesn't matter if it's PowerShell.exe or PowerShell ISC or any other module that loads the PowerShell binaries, it will be loaded in PowerShell. So you can see that this is the log that is saved. When PowerShell starts, it writes a lot of garbage. It's a lot of commands that it runs. But let's see what happens when we run whoami command. So you can see that AMSI got the whoami command. Babel Shellfish also got the script of whoami, but it also got the exact process that was run by PowerShell and the parameters that was passed to that process. So that was a simple example, and AMSI worked well. But let's see what happens if we use a little obfuscation in that script. We just use a string token obfuscation. It's a very simple one. And let's see what AMSI sees and what Babel Shellfish sees now. So you can see that by the result, it's whoami. And you can see that AMSI got the obfuscated script. PowerShell, Babel Shellfish, sorry, also got the obfuscated script, but it still got the process that was run and the parameter. So that gives you a lot of visibility on what can happen in the computer, but that's not all. Let's try something a little bit more complicated. I hope all of you know the AMSI bypass by Matt Graeber in a single tweet. Is it new to you, or should I explain a little bit more about it?
If you could explain it, yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I might need to share one page of the slide. Can you see my screen now?
It's a gray screen with a cursor.
Okay, so let me share this one with you. Just a second.
I was talking and apparently I didn't unmute. It's a very gray screen right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how do I change the screen that I'm sharing with you. Okay, new share, I found it. Okay, can you see it now?
I see a cursor moving. Oh, there it goes.
There it goes, yeah. So this is AMSI bypass in a single tweet by Matt Graeber. It uses reflection to find the AMSI class from the PowerShell engine. And there is a flag. Whenever PowerShell starts for the first time and it calls AMSI, it will load the AMSI DLL and it will try to initialize it. And if it fails, it saves a pooling flag that says that it failed, and then it will never try to call it again. So what Matt did, he found the class by using reflection, he found the field, and then he changes it to true, just using reflection commands that are available through .NET that PowerShell allows you to run. And if you run this command, it will simply disable AMSI because from now on, AMSI will think that it failed to load. The issue here with this bypass is that Microsoft now is aware of this bypass, so the first time you try to run it, it still passes through AMSI, and PowerShell and AMSI will catch this one and block it. However, if you use simple obfuscation on this command, it will still work and will still bypass AMSI. So what I want to show you now is how this command looks like in Babel Shellfish. Okay, so let's get back to the Babel Shellfish screen. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So now I will activate Windows Defender because AMSI has to have a security product that works with it. So we'll get a lot of pop-ups for Windows Defender. And we'll first run the command deobfuscated, and you will see that Windows Defender will block this command. And we got the threat warning, and the command didn't work. So next, what we'll do is we'll run the same command, but with the minimal obfuscation. And then we will see the log from Babel Shellfish compared to the AMSI log. And you will be able to see the power that Babel Shellfish provides to Bulletin. So as you can see, the command ran without being blocked. And you can see in the log that AMSI got the whole script. Also, Babel Shellfish got the whole script. But now Babel Shellfish also gets all the C# invocation. So it sees that the class runtime assembly has a function that was called getType, and you see the string, the obfuscated string of the AMSI util. You see that then getField was called on that result with the AMSI init fail and the non-public static function. And lastly, you can see the set value that is called on the field, setting it to true. So this gives the best visibility you can have, because it also deobfuscates all the strings that might have been obfuscated, but it shows you exactly what functions were called during the execution of the command. Those are just two examples, but Babel Shellfish also logs all the commands that are run, all the scriptlets. So you can see all the parameters that were passed, also deobfuscated. And we plan to add some more features later, but this is the basic functionality that we want to release to the public, and I hope Microsoft will implement it too. So now we can move to the other side, and I can show you InvisiShell. Okay, do you see a black screen now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I have set PowerShell here with the module logging, with script block logging, and transcription. And I also have AMSI working with Windows Defender on the background. And what I will do is I will run the invoke Mimikatz command. It's just a command that downloads Mimikatz and invokes it, and you can see that Windows Defender blocks the command because it's malicious. But let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's change the language mode to constrained language, and we'll run the same command. And now you can see that the constrained language mode is the feature that blocks us, and not Windows Defender. And you can see that the transcription was created. I will also show you the logs that were created, but I will just clean everything, so we'll have a clean slate to start with, and then you will see how powerful InvisiShell is for red teams. So you can see all the module logging and the scripted logging and all the engine logging. So we clear everything, we clear all the messages from Windows Defender, and the InvisiShell is just the profiler DLR. I didn't say it before. When we hook using the InvisiShell, we don't want to add another functionality to the functions that we hook. So instead of placing a hook from one function to call our hook function, we just replace the assembly code into a ret opcode. So essentially what happens in the background is if someone calls those functions, they just return and do nothing. And by using this method, we don't need to inject any other DLL except for the CLR profiler, which is injected by the .NET engine itself. And you can use this InvisiShell either as administrator, and that requires only changing some environment variables, or you can run it as non-admin, but that requires updating also some registry keys. So we will run it as administrator because we want to invoke Mimikatz. It's also a fancy batch script because you don't want to run PowerShell that will log that you just ran it. And now we'll set the constraint the language or the constraint language, and we'll execute invoke Mimikatz. No obfuscation, nothing at all. Just plain sight. And you can see that Mimikatz run. So we weren't blocked by Windows Defender. We weren't blocked by the constrained language mode, which is another security feature. But the most important thing, we didn't get any transcription written to the disk. And the most troubling thing is that there is no log message whatsoever on your event log that notifies you that even PowerShell was run. So by using the hooking techniques on the .NET model, we actually made it possible to bypass all of PowerShell security features at once. You don't need to resort to PowerShell 2. You can still use whatever PowerShell version that is on the client machine. All you need to do is just register the environment variables for the InvisiShell profiler, and it will do the magic behind the scenes for you.
Very cool.
Awesome. So, Omer, you said you haven't published the tools yet. I'm assuming that'll be published to the Javelin-Networks.com site or your GitHub repository?
It will probably be published to my first. I'll publish it on my Twitter account. I will also share you. You can see on the bottom. Those are some references I used in my research, but you can see on the bottom my Twitter handle.
And your Twitter handle is Yair_Omer.
Yeah,
It's just your last name _ first name.
Exactly. So
Awesome.
I will publish it on my Twitter account, probably also on the LinkedIn of Javelin. And we hope the beginning of next week, the public will also be able to use those tools. Yeah.
And in the meantime, folks can check out your talk and your slides as well.
Yeah, at DerbyCon. I think it was a good talk. But I also got good positive feedback on it. So
Excellent.
it also explains a lot on the internals of PowerShell, why MSI logs the things that it does and it misses a lot of things. Also a little bit on .NET, if people want to get to know why .NET is hard to hook. And lastly, you will also see some hooking methods, which is, I think it's also very cool, because when you hook PowerShell, you are actually hooking so many layers that are hidden to the user. Because the PowerShell scripts run on top of the PowerShell engine, which runs on top of the .NET framework, which runs on top of Windows, on the Windows environment that runs on assembly. And the hooking just jumps through all those hoops from the PowerShell script into the assembly language and jumps back up to the PowerShell script. So I think it's a really cool method, and it's very nice knowledge to people to gain.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Omer, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting me.
I encourage our listeners to go check out the video on YouTube of Omer's talk from DerbyCon. You can find that pretty easily either on YouTube itself or on irongeek.com. That was at DerbyCon 8. With that, we'll take a short break and come back with the security news for this week.